In this video, I'm going to show you how to work with the SQLite database that comes with Android. So we're just going to do a simple example to demonstrate how to do or how to work with the SQLite database. So for my example, I want to just basically create a view where the user will enter his name or enter a name and a cell phone number, and we're just saving people. So this is really just going to be a simple example, but to basically show you how an SQL database works. So I'm going to start off with a linear layout and set then the Android orientation property to vertical. Okay, I'm going to remove this text view. And then when we go back to design, you will have a clear design, but the linear layout will now be vertical. So I'm going to drag in just two simple text fields. So I'm going to drag in a plain text field, and for the cell number, maybe a phone text field or an edit text. Okay, so we've got those two. Then I'm going to drag in 4 buttons that we're going to use for this example. There's a button, 1, 2, 3, 4 buttons. Okay, so for all of these buttons, I'm going to set the width property to match the parent, and then I'm going to set the margin property on all of these. So layout margin left, I'm going to make it 30, and the right I'm going to make it 30 as well. So we'll have something that looks like this. For this button, let's put the top one also 10 dp just to move it a bit down. Okay, now we need to set the text on these components. So I'm going to go to the strings XML. So under resources, values, strings XML, let's set up those names quickly. So we're going to use one that says, or the name will be the hint for the name that you're going to type there. So we're going to just say, please enter name. The second one will be hint cell number or hint cell. And then we're going to say, please enter cell number. Then the next one will be for the submit button. So we're going to say btn underscore submit. And then we're just going to say the text will be submit. Then for the next button, it will be the show data button. So we're going to just say show underscore data. And then just put the string there, show data. Then the next one, string name equals btn, it will be edit data, and just say edit data. And then again, string name equals btn delete data, and it will be delete data. Okay, so I think we've set up all of the text that we're going to use. I'm going to close down the strings XML, and now if we go back to the layout, we can set up the hints for these two. So if we just click on that one and we go down to the hint property, 3 dots, we're going to go to hint and we're going to say hint name. And then for that one also the hint, but this one's this hint cell. And then for all of the buttons, so for the new the first button there, we're going to have the text btn submit. So it's just going to be submit. And then for that one, it will be the show data one. For the next button, double click, we're going to use the edit data one, this one. And then for the last button, it's going to be delete data. So we're going to use delete data. Okay, so that's setting up all of our buttons. Now these two, let's just make sure that they are centered. So we're going to go to the normal gravity property and then go to center horizontal. And now it looks good. So let's just set some IDs and some methods for the buttons. So for these two, we're going to set up IDs. So I'm going to call this one ET name. And I'm going to call that one ET cell. Okay, so we've got ET name and we've got ET cell. And then let's go and set up the methods quickly. So I'm going to set up the methods, public void. First one is going to be btn submit. And we're just going to have view v in brackets. And then for the next one, it will be public void btn show data. And then for this one, it will be public void btn edit data. And then the last one will be delete data. It's going to be public void btn delete data. And then we've created all of the methods that we're going to use. Now, before we go and set up the methods, let's just declare that edit texts as well. Remember, we call them ET name and ET cell. Just remember those two, ET name and ET cell. So we've declared them. Let's just initialize them quickly. ET name equals edit text, find the view by its ID, r.id. And then we're going to go with ET name for the first one, and then ET cell for the second one, which will also be an edit text, and it's going to be ET cell. Okay, so the two edit texts are set up nicely. Let's just go and set up these methods to the buttons. So if I click on the first button, submit, let's just go to the onClick property. There's the onClick property, and the first one will be btn submit. The second one will be btn show data. The third one, edit data, search for btn edit data. And then the last one will be delete data, and it will be that one. Okay, so now we've set up the whole thing. Both of these edit texts are set up in coding, as well as all of the methods for our buttons. Okay, so now the next thing that we want to do is to go and create a new activity, so that when we click on show data, it will actually go to a new activity and show us the data from the database. So we need to go and create a new activity. So on your folder, in the Java folder, in your package folder there, we're going to right click there and say new and activity, and then we're going to go to empty activity. And I'm going to call this activity, let me just resize the thing quickly. We're going to call that activity, let's just call it data. And then you can say finish. So we've got a new activity called data, and then in the layout folder we've also got data there, activity data. Okay, so let's just go and set up that activity data quickly. Basically, the only thing that we're going to have there is one text view. I'm just going to change that to a linear layout. That is vertical. So if you go down to design or back to design, just an empty view, and I'm going to add a simple medium text there, just on the left hand side, and we're going to go into our strings XML and just set the text for that one. And we're going to say, let's just say data. We're going to say something like data from the database will be displayed here. Okay, so if we go back to activity data, we can just double click that one and set the text to data. Okay, so data from the database will be displayed here. So that's basically where we're going to set the data. So I want to have a text view. For this text view, we need an ID. So I'm going to say TV data. And let's go to data and set up that text view. So we're going to say text view TV data, and then set them up, or set it up in the on create. So it's going to be TV data equals text view, find the view by its ID, and connect to TV data. So now it's connected, so we can actually go and set the text into that one. And in the main activity, we can go and say, well, when we want to go to btn show data, we can just go and say start activity, and then in brackets we're going to say new intent. You can have alt enter for the import. First argument, your context, which is just this, and then the second one is that data class that we want to call, and that will start the new activity. So when the guy then clicks on show data, it's going to go to the data activity, which will just basically be this one, and now we can set the text to it later on. Okay, so that's setting up the second activity. Okay, in order to do the next part, we need to actually go and create a Java class that will help us to build a database. So our database will look something like this, and I like to compare a database with an Excel workbook and all of its tabs there at the bottom and different rows and columns. So basically, we've got a database called contacts database, which could be your whole workbook. And then every table in your database you could see as the tabs at the bottom of an Excel spreadsheet. That's the tab, so that would be your tables. And then inside of every table, we've got columns and we've got rows. So we will basically create a database that looks like this. The database name will be contacts database. We're going to create a contacts table, and in that table, we will create just 3 columns. So there will be a column for the guy's ID, or maybe just a simple ID that will auto increment. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and so forth. And then there's going to be a name for the guy, and there's going to be a cell phone number for the guy. So this is basically what we need to create in order for our database to work for this example. So I hope you understand this simple example of Excel. So let's go back to Android Studio, and then we're going to change or create a new Java file. So under Java, in your project folder, you're going to right click and say new Java class, and we're going to call this class contacts DB, contacts database. So if you open up the class, it just looks like this, and we don't need to extend anything. We're just going to use the class as it is, and then hopefully this class will help us to build our application or our database. So we need to have some fields at the beginning. So we're going to say public static final, and we're going to have string, and we're going to have key row ID. Now remember the 3 columns that we had now in the Excel spreadsheet. If I can quickly just go back to that one, we have an ID, a name for the guy, and the cell phone number. So that's what I'm trying to do here. So the first one will be the ID, the row ID, and I'm going to use it as ID. That's the first column name. Then the second column name, public static final string, and I'm going to have key name, and then that column name we said should be person underscore name. And then we're going to create the next column, so it's going to be public static final string, and that one will be key cell. And then we're just going to declare it same as the Excel spreadsheet one with an underscore. Now very important, it will give you a problem if you do not use this underscore. So for something that does not have an underscore in it, like for instance person name, just make sure that you actually include an underscore. For somewhat odd reason, this doesn't work if you do not include the underscores. So please make sure that you add the underscore. So if you look at that Excel spreadsheet, we've created names for those three columns: ID, person name, and cell. Okay, so they are constants, and we're going to use those constants, but that's basically the three names for those three specific columns. Then the next one we're going to create will be our database name. So I'm going to say private final string, and I'm going to say database underscore name, and the database name will be contacts database. Then we're going to also have a private final string for the database table, the name of the table, and the name of the table will be contacts table. So you can see in our Excel spreadsheet, the name of the database is contacts database, and then we're going to work in the contacts table, and inside of that table we've got rows and columns, where the column names will be these. Okay, so just a simple example. So we need to have the database name and the database table name, and then a last one that we need is basically the database version. So for the version, we're just going to use an integer there, and we're going to say database underscore version, and obviously we start at version number 1. Okay, and then we're going to have some variables that we need to declare, which are we're going to have private DB helper, and we're going to create that class now. So this one is going to give us a problem. So it's private DB helper, our helper. Then it's going to be private final context, which we're just going to say our context. Okay, so it's just to get the class that is using this specific database of ours. And then context, you can use Alt Enter for your import there. We're going to check those errors now. It might not have been initialized. We're going to do that now. And then we're going to have private SQLite database. So android.database.sqlite, choose that one. So it's SQLite database, and we're going to say our database. So basically these declarations will help us later on. So just declaring those, we will get back to them as we get to the coding part. Okay, and now the next thing that we need to do is to create our constructor for this class. So we're going to say public contacts DB, a constructor for the class, and this constructor will basically just take the context. So basically just the class that's using this specific class of ours. So normally it will just be the specific activity that you pass in this. Okay, so it's just the context there, and the context that we created there, our context, we will set our context to this context that was passed through. Okay, so our constructor has been created, and now we're going to create this very important inner class, which will be called DB helper. Okay, so this class will be a private class, so we're going to say private class DB helper, and we're going to say extends SQLite open helper, SQLite open helper. Okay, and then when we open up the method, or the class, then if you hover over it, you can see that it says the DB helper must either be declared abstract or implement the method, the abstract method on create, which accepts an SQLite database in brackets. So we're going to go to code, override methods, and search for those on create method, which accepts an SQLite database. And you're going to say OK. And then you'll see it's got another error there. It must also have the on upgrade method. So again, go to code, override methods, and go and choose the on upgrade method, this one, and say OK. And then if you hover over it again, you can see there's no default constructor available. So we need to create a constructor for this class. So the constructor for this class will just be public DB helper. And then again, we're just going to pass in the context. But this time, we're going to send this to the superclass of the SQLite open helper. So it's going to be the context, passing in the context that was passed through, this one there. The second argument will be your database name so that we can create the database. So the database name, the second argument null, and then the third argument will be the database version. So then this constructor will basically construct a new database.